He resembled a man half buried in the world already. Silas Whitmore was alone at a gnarled wooden table, a shaking pen in his calloused fingers. His weathered countenance creased with the burden of 45 long years, and his soul, gutted by loss, hovered on the brink of giving up. Outside, sun pounded the parched earth, and the only noise was the faraway whisper of wind, until a shriek cut into the stillness. A woman's shriek, desperate and rough, tearing across the prairie and flinging him back from the brink of last things. Silas glared at the white paper in front of him. The letter was to be matter-of-fact, plain facts. No poetry, no sympathy, just the truth. The bank was foreclosing on the ranch tomorrow. His wife passed away 2 winters ago from fever. His son was eaten by a war that ate all the sons. There wasn't much left to save. Nothing worth leaving behind. He clutched the pen harder and penned the opening sentence. To whoever finds this letter, then again the scream. Closer this time, desperate and unfamiliar. He paused, listening. Words he didn't understand, but panic sounded the same in every language. He scooted back from the table, his chair scraping on the floorboards. Outside the grime-stained window, the road to town was deserted, or so it was for a moment. But the yelling came louder. A person came stumbling into view, staggering through the heat. A woman, tiny, with black hair flying behind her, something clutched tight in her arms. She was running directly towards him, voice broken with urgency. As she fell against his porch railing, Silas glimpsed the bundle in her arms. A small girl, pale and limp, struggling to stay alive. The woman gazed at him with fear in her eyes. "Please," she urged in fractured English. "My daughter, she dying." Silas stood locked in the doorway, pen still clutched in hand, final words forgotten. Her face was smeared with dust and tears, her arms shaking as she tightened her grip around the child. She'd run miles in scorching heat, all for a second chance. And the man she found seemed like he was about to give up on life himself. The child, no more than 6, barely breathed, her skin the color of ashes. Silas recognized that gray hue. He'd seen it before. It never meant anything good. "Doctor," the woman gasped. "Need doctor. Town, they say no. Say go away." And Silas knew. The town tolerated its few Chinese families on good days, and turned ugly on bad days. Doc Mercer was an okay man, but his waiting room would empty quickly if he was caught treating somebody like her. Something's wrong with her? Silas found himself asking. Fever. 3 days now. The woman wept. She no wake up. No eat. No drink. I try everything. She all I have. Her first name was Lynn, and the girl's was May. Wiping away tears and through broken English, Lynn told how they lived in a shack in the back of Wong's grocery store. She took whatever work she could get. Laundry, cleaning, hauling, anything to keep them going. But when May got sick, every door she approached had slammed in her face. Silas looked at her. She was younger than he'd originally assumed. Not even 30. There was a delicate beauty about her, like the china dolls his deceased wife used to have, but underlying that, there was determination. This woman didn't quit readily. I ain't no doctor, he finally said. Please, Lynn breathed, cupping the child in her hands like an offering. You only one. Not close door. You only one. Listen. Something curled within Silas, a hurt he had not experienced in years. He had intended to be gone from this world today. Life, however, had appeared at his door, insisting on one more act of compassion. He gazed once more at the little girl's fists clenched in sleep. Even in unconsciousness, she still struggled. Doc Mercer's over the general store, Silas said, his words slow and deliberate. But he won't treat her unless it's paid in advance. Especially. He waved a vague hand at Lynn's appearance. I have money, she said hastily, pulling out a small cloth-wrapped bundle from her pocket. She unwrapped it with trembling fingers. A handful of coins, barely sufficient for a loaf of bread. Silas stared at the tiny offering, likely everything she had in the world, and she was willing to trade it all for a sliver of hope. Inside, The unfinished letter still sat on the table. But standing here with this desperate woman and her dying child, that letter no longer felt like the end. "Put that away," he said quietly. "We'll need my horse." But even as he boosted her up behind him into the saddle, Silas knew this was just the start. The journey to town seemed to go on forever. Lynn held on to his back, muttering prayers in a language he was unfamiliar with, holding May tight to her chest. Every few minutes she'd feel for the girl's breath, exhaling a sigh of relief at the slight flutter of life. Town was more active than a Tuesday ought to find it. Ranch hands from the Prescott spread were wandering the streets, and Sacramento cattle buyers were crowding the saloons and stores. All heads turned as Silas rode in with the Chinese woman and her ailing child, and he knew judgment was already being formed. He halted before Morrison's general store. Doc Mercer's office was perched above it, indicated by a faded sign creaking in the breeze. As he assisted Lynn down, James Morrison appeared in the doorway, brushing his hands across his apron. "Hold on right there," Morrison shouted. "You can't be taking them people up to document. Other people won't approve." Silas turned, clenching his jaw. "The child is ill, Morrison." "Ill? That ain't our problem," Morrison replied, glancing around. There was as much as a crowd beginning to gather. "They have their own," he continued. "Herbs, roots, whatever they do. Don't need our doctor." "My daughter dying," Lynn declared, moving forward. "Your English is pretty good for a person who don't belong here," sneered a voice in the crowd. Billy Sawyer, one of Prescott's cowhands, pushed forward, his smirk congealing into cruelty. "You might oughta go back where you came from." Grumbles of agreement spread through the spectators. Silas felt the weight fall onto him as it always did. That same comfortable feeling of being outnumbered, outvoiced, outvoted. These were his neighbors, men he'd ridden with, shared a bottle of whiskey with. But now, gazing about at their scowling faces and hard eyes, he saw something he hadn't really seen before. A quiet cruelty that had always stood behind polite nods and Sunday pleasantries. "She is as much at home here as anybody," Silas replied softly. "She's paying her taxes, obeying the law." "Is she now?" Morrison retorted, his tone laced with smugness. "Interesting thing about that, Whitmore. I hear you're losing your ranch to the bank. Perhaps you are not the best judge of who is at home where." The words hit like a rib punch. Silas recognized folks whispered about his problems, but to hear them laid out plain in half the town's hearing, right in the middle of a street, it scraped some raw place. He sensed Lynn tighten up behind him, comprehending the slight even though the words came awry to her ears. At the head of the stairs, finally emerged Doc Mercer, called by the commotion. He was a skinny man with gentle eyes, but even gentleness had its limits. And currently, they were surveying the clustering crowd with uncertainty. "What's the matter down there?" he bellowed. Before any of them could respond, May shifted in her mother's arms. A tiny, pained cry racked her lungs, weak but desperate. It sliced through the cacophony like a sword, hushing all voice. That sound, a child racked with pain, took away politics, prejudices, and petty arguments. It was human. It was universal. Doc Mercer blanched. For 30 years, he'd sworn an oath. Heal the sick, mend the wounded, no matter who they were. But 30 years had also shown him that ideals didn't pay for supplies or dissuade irate patients from elsewhere. "Doc," Silas shouted. "This little one needs attention now." Mercer glanced from the boy to the crowd, and the crowd, catching his hesitation, began to close in. Morrison moved forward once more. "Doc, you know what's best for this town. We've got standards to keep." "Standards?" A crisp voice cut in, unexpected and unyielding. Mrs. Catherine Henley, the preacher's wife, pushed through the crowd like a hurricane in calico. 60 years old, her back a fence post and her spirit one no one dared challenge. The same woman who fed the poor, comforted the dying, and organized the church social like a war zone. "James Morrison," she said icily, "since when do our standards involve allowing children to die in the filth?" Morrison moved, feeling suddenly uneasy. "Now, Mrs. Henley," This ain't about hogwash, she snapped and pushed past him. She knelt down beside Lynn and peered down at May. The child's breathing was deteriorating. Her fever-red skin shone abnormally bright. This baby needs a doctor, not fables. Billy Sawyer spat on the ground. Easy enough for you to say, ma'am. But what do you expect when word gets around that we're treating their kind as good as our own? Before long, every China from here to San Francisco wants special treatment. Mrs. Henley rose, her voice cold as shattered glass. And what is so bad about treating sick people as human beings? The crowd grumbled again, and this time there was a different timbre. Where there used to be conviction, now there was unease. Some women crept forward, attracted by the sound of May's labored breathing, their maternal instincts combating their rigorous creed. Doc Mercer coughed. "Examination's $2 down," he said, voice carefully noncommittal. But Silas could sense the weight behind it. A test. A challenge. Lynn had gone for her coins once more, that little pocket cloth package with her last hope within. But Silas halted her. He dug into his own pocket and produced 5 scrunched-up dollars. The remaining of what he'd stored. Money to keep him going or get him through the finish. "Here's your fee," he offered, extending it. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Where'd a man who had a foreclosed ranch come up with $5? Silas didn't blink. "None of your damn business." And for the first time that day, Morrison backed off. But Billy Sawyer wasn't done. "Maybe it ain't your money, Whitmore. Maybe you're getting paid to stir up trouble. Help these people make a scene." The accusation hung like smoke, bitter, lingering. Silas's hands curled into fists. But before he could speak, a shield stepped between them. Mrs. Henley. She turned to Billy with a look of rage that could scorch paint. "If you're implying that aiding a sick child is trouble," she snapped, "then perhaps you should spend more time in church and less with a bottle in your hand." The street went quiet. No one challenged Mrs. Henley. Not when she spoke like that. Lines had been drawn. Everyone sensed it. Whatever occurred next would not be forgotten. Doc Mercer stood at the head of the stairs, eyes darting from the bills in Silas's hand to the white child in Lynn's arms, and then to the gathered crowd. He made his decision with every step down, his choice riding on every groaning board. When he landed on the bottom step, he didn't address Morrison or Silas. He gazed directly at Lynn. "Bring her up," he said. Morrison advanced. "Doc, think what you're doing. Your practice, your name." "I've been thinking about it," Mercer interrupted. "Been thinking about it for 30 years. About the oath I took. About what kind of man I am." He addressed the crowd. "Anyone who's got a problem with me treating a sick child is free to find a new doctor." The words hit home. Some changed position on their heels. No one departed. Silas escorted Lynn up the steps, May in her arms limping. Mrs. Henley remained down below like a guard. Billy Sawyer began to protest once more, but a single stare from her shut him up. Within the tiny upstairs office, Doc Mercer worked efficiently. He examined May's breathing, her pulse, her chest. His expression became increasingly black with each passing second. "How long's she been like this?" he asked. 3 days fever," Lynn breathed. "Today, she won't wake." 3 days fever," Lynn breathed. "Today, she won't wake." Doc nodded, grim-faced. "It's pneumonia. Bad. Her lungs are full. Without treatment, she may not see sunrise." Lynn buckled at the knees. Silas caught her, held her upright. That hollow, helpless expression in her eyes, the same one he remembered in his wife, when fever claimed their son. "But you can help her?" Silas asked. "I can do it," Mercer said. "Laudanum for pain, camphor for the lungs. But she needs something more than medicine. She needs attention, cooling her fever, being with her all night." Lynn nodded between tears. "I remain. I take care. Just where?" Doc hesitated. "She can't return to that shack. She needs heat, clean air, somewhere to lie down." But they all understood. No one in town would give a room to a Chinese woman with an ill child. The boarding house would shut its doors. The rest of town would provide chillier shelter than the prairie night. Outside, The crowd remained, discussing morality like it was a ballot. Inside, a little girl was perishing. Silas gazed at Lynn, then down at May. And in the back of his mind, he saw it again, that half-written letter, still sitting on his table. "She can stay with me," he said. Lynn and Mercer blinked at him. He couldn't even believe it himself. "Silas," Doc said slowly, "you sure about that? After what just went down out there?" Silas looked down at the child, her chest rising and falling in tiny, labored breaths. "Let them watch," he said. "She needs help, and I've got a clean house and a warm bed. That's all that matters now." Lynn's eyes filled with tears, but this time, not out of fear. For the first time during her nightmare, she saw hope staring back at her. You do this for us? For strangers?" she asked, shaking. "You ain't strangers anymore," Silas replied softly. "Not after today." Doc Mercer stuffed what medicines he could. Tiny vials of medicine, strips of clean gauze, script-written instructions in careful, practiced handwriting. "A spoonful of this every 4 hours," he instructed Lynn. "Cool cloths to reduce the fever. If her breathing gets worse, you come get me. I don't care what time." As they started to leave, Doc restrained Silas with a gentle hold on the arm. "You know what you're doing? It's not only the girl. That woman has nowhere to go, no job, no shelter that's safe. You take her in now, you may be taking her in for a while." Silas remembered the incomplete letter still lying on his kitchen counter, the one that was going to be his last statement to a world which had taken everything from him. How quickly life could sweep a man in the opposite direction, he chuckled. "One day at a time, Doc," he murmured. "That's all I can vow." The return ride to the ranch was also in silence, heavy with unspoken thought. Lynn kept May close, monitoring every breath, and Silas drove with his eyes on the road and the sense of glances from people along the way. News would spread quickly about what had transpired at Doc Mercer's office. Silas assisted Lynn in getting May into the bed he and his wife once shared. Lynn moved with muffled care, heeding the doctor's advice strictly, cooling the child's skin, measuring out doses, muttering calming words in Chinese that seemed to soothe the fevered child even in slumber. "You know how to tend the sick," Silas noted. Lynn nodded, never taking her eyes off her daughter. "In China, I assist my mother. She was, what you say, midwife. Assisted women in childbirth, tended to sick children. I learned a lot from her before." Her voice faded, overshadowed by ancient memories. "Before what?" "Before war arrived. Everything changed. We had to depart." Still caring for her daughter, Lynn's voice contained the sadness of exile. "We come to America for better life. For May to have chances I never had." Silas observed her work. This was not a desperate mother doing the best she could. This was someone who knew about healing, whose hands moved with instinct and skill. "Where's May's father?" he asked softly. Her actions froze. "He passed on board, fever, like so many others. Just me and May left now." She caught Silas's gaze, eyes which held too much grief for a person still so young. "You lost loved ones too," she said. "I can see it in your face." He nodded. "Wife. Son." Other times, same type of loss. For a moment, they sat in silence together, two individuals sewn together by sorrow, guarding a little girl caught between death and life. Outside, the sun was setting low, bathing the cabin with dissolving gold. But as darkness crept in, they knew the hour worst was yet to come. Near the break of dawn, the fever broke. Silas woke in the window chair, just awake enough. But Lynn had not gone to sleep at all. She'd spent the endless night wiping May's forehead, speaking in 2 tongues, administering medicine to shaking lips. And when May finally opened her eyes and croaked, "Mama," Lynn collapsed into her daughter with a tear of joy. "She's thirsty," Lynn wept. Silas brought clean well water in his finest cup. They sat while May sipped slowly, her skin already starting to strengthen. She blinked in the strange room, at the bearded stranger sitting beside her. "Where are we, Mama?" she asked, still weak but alert. "This is Mr. Silas's home," Lynn explained carefully. He took care of you when you were seriously ill. May's big eyes turned to Silas. Her voice was serious, age-wise beyond her years. Thank you for rescuing Mama. She was really frightened. Something inside Silas, something that had long been immobile, began to stir. A small, trusting voice had blown open the rusty doors around his heart. You're welcome, little one, he murmured. You scared us silly. As morning dawned, fresh questions emerged. Lynn described how she'd rented a little back room from behind Wong's shop, working what little she could from doing housework and laundry. But following yesterday's riot, even that tenuous stability was probably gone. Got proposal, Lynn announced as May slept next to her. You need assistance with house, cooking, cleaning, work on ranch. I work hard. We remain here. We labor in return for food and roof. Silas surveyed his messy house. The dishes stacked in the sink, dust on shelves, the makings of a man who'd lost hope. He hadn't been surviving. He'd been waiting to depart. And here was this woman now, promising to assist him in building something he hadn't even known was still intact. Town folks won't approve, he told her honestly. A Chinese woman and child on a white man's property. They'll gossip. Let them gossip, Lynn answered, unflinching and resolute. We endure worse than gossip. We work hard. 'Cause no trouble. You give us opportunity, we establish ourselves. Silas thought again of the letter to whoever finds this. Those words belonged to a man who no longer existed. He looked at Lynn, then at the sleeping child who'd just beaten death. All right, he said. We'll try it. See how it goes. It went better than any of them expected. Lynn made the house a home. The air was not so heavy anymore. Laughter again. May's laughter, bright and boisterous, filling empty spaces. Together they gardened, fixed the fence, kept the household going. And Silas, for the first time in years, felt he had something to get up for in the morning. When the bank finally arrived to serve its notice of finality, they discovered a ranch brought back to life. Debt worn down, livestock healthy, and a new type of family that would not be displaced. Silas Whitmore had discovered his reason for staying. And Lynn Chan had at last discovered the safe haven she'd traveled an ocean to find. The note on the kitchen table was never completed. Some goodbyes, it seemed, were best left unspoken. Years down the road, May grew up tough, fluent in 2 languages and smart. She assisted her mother in operating one of the finest ranches in the county. Silas got to see her receive a diploma from the new schoolhouse, then wed a warm man who didn't judge people by their color or lineage, but by their actions and compassion. Lynn never remarried. She didn't need to. She had built a life. Not the one she planned, but the one she and Silas had shaped together, from the ruins of heartbreak and the roots of hope. The old cabin still stands, home to generations raised on hard work, open hearts, and the simple truth that sometimes, the ones who save us come from the most unexpected places.